wind whipped through the darkening woods, tugging at branches and sending leaves scattering into the air like lost souls. Shadows danced under the fading day as a sudden crack echoed through the quiet, the snapping of twigs amplifying an eerie silence. There, in the heart of this encroaching night, a girl sat shivering, her breath turning to mist, clutching her knees to her chest for warmth. She hardly noticed the cold creeping into the very marrow of her bones. She was more consumed by the gnawing ache of despair. Just hours before, she had been in the warmth of a bustling town, a place filled with laughter, music, the warm aroma of baked bread floating through the air. Elena had been a part of that feeling, a sunbeam in her little frock and bright blue sneakers, but the world had a way of twisting joy into sorrow. In the blink of an eye, that warmth melted away, leaving her stranded with nothing but shadows for company. Footsteps. The crunch of leaves snapped her from her thoughts. Elena peeked from behind the gnarled roots of the old oak tree. She spotted him, a horseman draped in a dark cloak, his silhouette framed by the gloomy twilight. He was a figure of mystery, a guardian of the night, and in that moment she felt a flicker of hope. But it was quickly snuffed out by caution. One could not be too sure in places like this. As the steed's hooves pounded softly against the damp earth, he stopped, his gaze sweeping across the surrounding woods. The moon peered from behind clouds, illuminating the features of his face, strong, worn, yet kind. Elena held her breath, the chill of fear clawing in her throat, instinctively thinking he might be just another lurking shadow, another threat. He called out, his voice rich and deep, echoing through the night like a distant bell. It was a challenge, but also an invitation. Gathering her courage, Elena stepped out from her hiding place, the raw silence between them stretching as the air grew thick with unspoken words. I'm lost, she managed, the words trembling like leaves in the wind. The horseman dismounted swiftly, his fluid movements commanding respect, yet his demeanor was warm and gentle. He took a step toward her, his eyes filled with a strange mix of concern and understanding. You shouldn't be out here alone. Glancing down, Elena saw her feet bare and cold, the frost beginning to bite at her skin. I lost them, she stuttered. As she spoke, memories flooded back. The raucous laughter of children, the bright carousel twirling in the center of town, her mother's voice warning her to stay close. How quickly everything had unraveled. He knelt beside her, eyes scanning her face, searching for signs of fear. He asked, his tone softening like the glow of the moonlight filtering through the trees. Elena, she whispered. Elena, I'm Darius, he replied, a hint of a smile softening his features. And it seems you have found yourself in quite the predicament. As he stood, Elena noticed something unexpected. He had a certain aura about him, a unique blend of strength and compassion. For a fleeting moment, the fear began to dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of safety. Darius reached toward his horse, who stood patiently beside him. You're going to have to climb up, Elena. The thought sent a rush through her system, a wave of anxiety mixed with adrenaline, but she knew it was better than staying out in the cold. With care, he helped her into the saddle, the world suddenly stretching wide beneath her. Hold tight, he instructed, and Elena wrapped her arms around his waist, the rhythmic heartbeat of the horse sending shivers of something new through her excitement, perhaps. And with that, they were off, galloping through the darkened forest, the tall trees whispering secrets as they soared past. Despite the cold nipping at her skin, warmth flooded her heart. This wasn't just freedom, it was a second chance. As they rode, Elena felt a bond forming between them, forged in the night's silence, louder than the wind howling around them. Darius shared stories of his travels, reliving memories of sparkling cities beneath lavish lights and skies painted with hues of dawn. Each tale seemed to weave threads of hope around Elena's fragile spirit, stitching together the pieces that despair had torn apart. But then, just as her heart dared to dream, the shadows thickened. They rode into a clearing where the moonlight revealed remnants of an abandoned village, houses left to crumble in shambles, windows like hollow eyes staring into the void. Darius slowed the pace, tension rippling through him. He looked around, scanning the eerily quiet landscape. Something feels off, he muttered, his eyes narrowing at the sight. Elena whispered, holding her breath. It's always a gamble, he replied, hoisting her closer. Suddenly, from the darkened edges of the village, figures emerged, menacing shadows moving swiftly, as if drawn by the stillness of the night. Elena's heart raced, each thud pounding in her ears like a war drum. They were surrounded by a handful of figures, their intentions hidden behind masks of malevolence. A voice barked, deep and foreboding. Darius straightened, eyes blazing with defiance. "You'll let her go," he ordered, his voice steady despite the urgency in the air. Elena pressed her cheek against his back, feeling the tightness in his muscles, the unyielding resolve wrapped around her like a shield. "She's not the issue," another figure snarled, his gaze greedy, assessing. "Beyond your wildest dreams, I promise," Darius shot back. Elena's heart ached for him. She didn't know where she had come from, what debts he owed, but she could see the battle raging inside him, protect her or face them. Suddenly, with a fierce surge of defiance, Darius snapped the reins, urging the horse forward, smashing through the circle of threats. Wind rushed past them, the roar of freedom filling their lungs, but the shadows lunged forward. Fingers brushed against Elena's ankle, cold and threatening, as one of the figures reached for her. Searing panic shot through her, but Darius pulled her closer, quickening the stallion's stride. He shouted as they navigated through the chaos, the world blurring around them. Daring turns and swift maneuvers sent fear and exhilaration coursing through Elena's veins. They burst into the open woods, the moon illuminating their escape, but the darkness behind them remained relentless, a ghost chasing them through the trees. Elena held tighter, the branches snatching at her clothes, but she felt a new courage rising within. She wasn't just a victim, she was alive, fighting against the odds. Darius glanced back, determination etched on his face. He yelled as the horse leaped over fallen logs with a grace that took her breath away. The chase felt eternal, the night enveloping them in its cloak, but Darius was relentless. As they zigzagged through the forest, the sounds of pursuit faded, swallowed by the night. Elena was exhilarated by the sheer power of the ride, the adrenaline coursing through her with each heartbeat. Then, just as they broke free from the confines of the trees, a clearing opened before them. The expanse of a frozen lake stretched wide, shimmering under the pale moonlight. In an instant, Darius pulled to a stop, the horse snorting, its breath fogging in the crisp air. They had escaped. But as Elena slid off the horse, she felt a new weight settle in her heart. "You didn't have to risk yourself for me," she whispered, staring up into Darius's eyes. He sighed, the tension easing from his shoulders. "I couldn't leave you behind. We all need someone, Elena." For the first time, Elena saw through the lines of hardship etched into his face. He was not just a stranger, he was a fighter, a protector. In that moment, a bond forged in desperation became something deeper in understanding that transcended words. As they stood there on the brink of safety, surrounded by the cold beauty of the night, hope blossomed anew. Pulled from her thoughts, Elena noticed Darius scanning the horizon. "It's not over yet," he murmured, a hint of determination painting his features. A grin spread across her face for the first time since this chaos began. "Then let's go find them," she declared, newfound confidence lighting her soul. And as they turned toward the path that led back, side by side, they understood something profound. Sometimes it takes being left in the cold to discover the warmth of companionship, the strength in vulnerability, and the courage lurking in the shadows. Together they stepped forward, not as two lost souls, but as allies bound by the trials of the night, stronger than fear, more formidable than despair. The journey wasn't just about escaping the darkness. It was about facing it together, forging ahead with all the passion hidden in the depths of their hearts. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, they began their adventure anew. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, the kind that promise a storm, and as the first drops of rain splattered down, a little girl stared at the world around her with wide, terrified eyes. Elena stood barefoot on the edge of a sprawling forest, the cold dirt sending shivers up her spine. Just hours ago, she'd been safe, secure, surrounded by the bustle of her hometown, the laughter of children, the warmth of home. But now she felt adrift, a tiny island in a sea of uncertainty. She'd lost her way in a moment of youthful distraction, chasing after a colorful butterfly, and the joy of that fleeting moment turned to panic as she realized how far she had traveled. Each step away from civilization felt like a step deeper into darkness. The cold seeped through the earth, biting at her small, vulnerable feet, and suddenly the world was much less inviting. As the rain began to fall heavier, Elena's heart raced. The forest loomed ominously, branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the brooding sky. Her mind conjured up shadows, things lurking just beyond her sight, creatures waiting to take advantage of her vulnerability. She backed up against the rough bark of an ancient tree, drawing her knees to her chest, hoping to find warmth in the very embrace of the forest. Then through the din of the storm she heard something, a rhythmic sound that shattered the oppressive silence. Thud, thud. It was faint but persistent, like a heartbeat. Heart pounding, she strained to listen, and just as doubt began to gnaw at her, she saw him, a figure emerging from the mist, a horseman cutting through the downpour like a guardian angel. He rode tall and proud, cloaked in dark leather, his wide-brimmed hat shielding his face from the relentless rain. The horse he rode was equally majestic, a magnificent creature with a coat that shimmered even in the dreary light. Elena felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her, but doubt quickly followed. What if he wasn't a hero? What if he was just another shadow? But as he drew closer, the determined look in his eyes radiated warmth, cutting through the chill wrapping around her. "Hey there, little one," he called, his voice steady like the ground beneath them. The words poured from her mouth before she could stop them. "I lost my shoes." The urgency of her plea shattered her own trembling voice. The horseman dismounted gracefully, a hint of concern weaving through his brows. Elena took a hesitant step forward as he approached, her heart roaring like the storm around them. "You're freezing," he said, concern etched deep in his features. Elena glanced down at her feet, now muddy and cold, the reality of her situation crashing down. "I don't know, Her voice quivered, tears threatening to spill over. With soft authority, he knelt beside her, taking one of her tiny hands in his large, weathered palm. In that simple gesture, she felt the warmth of connection, a lifeline in the storm. "Let's get you somewhere safe." For a moment, Elena hesitated. Fear and hesitation warred inside her. She didn't know him, but she could see kindness in his eyes, resilience in his posture. She found her voice again, though it was barely a whisper. He smiled gently, but one who wants to help. Those simple words resonated deep inside. Her heart opened just a bit. The storm continued to pour, the rain soaking through to her bones, and she knew she had to choose. "Okay," she finally responded, determination cracking through her fear. He helped her onto the horse, lifting her effortlessly as the rain dripped from the brim of his hat. "Hold tight, Elena," he said as he swung up behind her, wrapping a strong arm around her waist. With a firm nudge, the horse sprang forward, galloping through the woods, and in an instant they soared into the rain, thunder cracking overhead. Elena clung to him, the rush of wind whipping through her hair, splashes of raindrops mixing with her excitement. It felt as if they were flying, escaping the very fears that had confined her moments ago. She turned to glance back at the tree line, the towering giants now just shadows fading into the storm. Fear began to melt away, replaced by adrenaline and the cautious thrill of adventure. But just as quickly, the world around them changed. The trees began to thin, and the horsemen pulled back on the reins, slowing their pace as they burst into a sprawling meadow. For a moment, Elena could hardly take it all in. The expanse of wildflowers swaying under the relentless rain, the distant mountains barely visible through the mist. And yet the beauty of the scenery was overshadowed by her still-present worry. She asked, looking up into his strong features. "The nearest town is just beyond the hills. We'll find you some shoes and get you warm," he replied confidently, reassuring her that everything would be all right. With determination sparking in his eyes, he urged the horse forward again, and Elena marveled at how the horse galloped free across the meadow, exploding with energy, the storm painting everything in shades of gray and green. But as they approached the rise of the hills, something shifted in the air. The sound of thunder rumbled closer, almost like a warning, and she felt the horseman tense behind her. "Hold on tight," he murmured, urgency infusing his tone. Just then, dark silhouettes began to emerge in the far distance, figures on horseback, their intentions concealed by the storm. Elena's heart raced again, panic bubbling up. She asked, fear pouring into her voice. His grip tightened around her waist, protective yet commanding. "They might try to stop us." In that instant, the thrill of adventure crumbled into trepidation, but Elena found solace in Darius. She finally learned his name. For this was not just a stranger, he was a warrior facing the unknown for her sake. As they galloped towards the hills, the outlaws picked up speed, emerging like phantoms from the mist. She could hear their shouts, demands mingling with the roar of the rain, a storm of danger. Darius leaned closer against her ear, his breath warm on her cheek. "We'll outsmart them," he promised, his voice fierce. With a sudden twist, Darius shifted the horse's direction, plunging into the thick woods once more. They wove through the trees, branches snapping like whispers on either side. The sound of hooves pounding earth echoed in the distance, a chase, a life hanging in the balance. Elena's heart felt like a caged bird trying to escape, but she took a breath and focused. Each twist and turn grounded her, the rhythm of Darius's strength her anchor. She asked, desperately needing reassurance. "Absolutely." His confidence transformed the landscape from threatening to something they could conquer together. In the midst of the chase, she felt her fear evolve into something sharper, determination. They rounded a bend and found themselves stopped by a wall of thick bushes and brambles. Darius swung down swiftly and pulled her to him. "We need to hide." He led her into a small space between the dense foliage, the storm masking their presence. As they crouched down, adrenaline buzzing like electricity, Elena's heart raced in time with the thunder rolling overhead. They held their breath as the outlaws thundered past, fury and shouts mixing with the clamor of the storm. Darius remained completely still, a sentinel watching for danger. Elena felt the warmth of his body next to hers, the strength radiating from him like a shield. When the sounds finally faded into silence, he released a breath she hadn't realized he was holding. Emerging from their hiding spot, he looked down at her, and a small smile broke through the storm clouds. Slowly, the fear began to ebb, replaced with a rush of exhilaration. "I was really scared," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I know, but look at you, you're brave," Darius said, his eyes gleaming like the sun finally breaking through the rain. His words wove threads of strength around her spirit, and Elena felt pride swell inside her for the first time. She asked, needing to shake off the remnants of dread. "For now," he replied, patting the horse affectionately before he mounted it again. "But we need to keep moving." With renewed resolve, they climbed back into the saddle and the world opened up before them. The hilltops topped with mist, the town just over the next rise. And as they rode, Elena felt a transformation brewing deep within her, the storm inside her beginning to settle. Finally, they crested a hill, and the sight below took her breath away. A quaint little town, lights glimmering like stars amidst the rain warmth, laughter swirling in the air, and a sense of safety surrounded her like a cocoon. But it wasn't just the sight that brought her comfort. It was the thought of the shoes, the warmth, the people waiting to welcome them. As they descended, Elena could already envision herself in a dry home, sipping hot cocoa while the story of her adventure unfolded, every detail flowing from her lips like a tribute to bravery. They made their way into the town, the rain finally beginning to relent, revealing a sky kissed with the colors of twilight. Darius led the horse along the cobblestone path, weaving through the small shops and bustling restaurants, people smiling at them with sympathy and warmth. "Look there," he pointed to a tiny shop with a window full of bright, colorful shoes. Elena's heart soared, and for the first time she truly smiled, feeling the thrill of hope pushing through the shadows. They entered the shop, the warmth wrapping around her like a long-lost hug, and she stepped up to the counter with Darius beside her, as she selected the pair that caught her eye, a bright red pair that felt like magic. The shopkeeper, an older, kindly woman with a smile full of wrinkles, fitted them onto Elena's feet with great care. "Those will keep you warm, dear," she said, patting Elena's head gently. And in that moment, Elena knew she'd found more than just a way back to safety. She had found kindness, connection, and a story she would carry with her forever. The tale of how a little girl lost in the tempest found her way home with the help of a brave horseman. As they stepped back into the street, Elena looked at Darius, who stood tall like a hero in a storybook, his face illuminated with kindness. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "Sometimes we all need saving," he replied with a smile, his eyes twinkling. And so, hand in hand, they ventured into the heart of the town, leaving the remnants of fear behind. Together they faced the future, a profound knowing weaving their souls together, stronger than the storm they had endured. Elena had not only found her footing again, she had discovered a truth about herself, that even in the cold, dark moments, warmth could be ignited by simply trusting in others. And from that day forward, every time she laced up her shoes, she felt echoes of their adventure whispering in the back of her mind. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. The sky loomed in shades of gray, and a biting wind howled through the narrow alleyways of a sleepy town. Raindrops started falling, heavy and cold, soaking the cobblestones and slipping under the massive wooden doors of shops that would soon close for the day. But amidst the gloom, there she was, a small figure lost in the shadows. Elena stood barefoot at the edge of the town, staring into the forest that loomed like a dark curtain before her. How did she end up here? Just hours ago, she had been laughing and playing with friends, her blue sneakers the proud badge of her youthful freedom. But in a moment of curiosity, she'd wandered too far. The laughter faded, replaced by a sense of panic that tightened around her chest like a vice. Now, the world seemed vast and unforgiving, and the cold seeped into her bones, creeping up from her bare feet as she stood shivering in the damp. It felt like both a distant memory and a haunting reminder of her mistake. Fear clutched at her heart, and with each gust of wind, every rustle of leaves, the forest felt more like a monster waiting to pounce than a patch of nature. Just then, amidst her thoughts, she heard something hooves pounding on the wet earth, a rhythmic sound like a heartbeat. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The shadow of a horseman appeared, cutting through the rain like a knife through fog. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. Who was he? Was he a friend or a foe? As he drew closer, she could see him clearly. He wore a dark, weathered cloak, and his face held a strong yet kind expression. The horse beneath him was a beautiful creature, strong and majestic, with muscles rippling beneath a glossy coat. They moved as if part of one body, a perfect harmony of man and beast. He called out, his deep voice booming above the roar of the storm. His tone was firm yet gentle, cutting through the clouds of despair that enveloped her. Panic surged through Elena, and she could barely find her voice. She felt absurd, standing there like a lost child. The horseman dismounted gracefully, his movements fluid as though he danced with horses all his life. Elena took a hesitant step backward, instinctively afraid. Would he help her? Or was he another shadow in a world gone dark? He knelt down, bringing himself closer to her eye level. "You're freezing." The sincerity in his voice penetrated her fear, softening the edges of her anxiety. She glanced down at her feet, mud-caked and cold, and a wave of shame washed over her. She had done this to herself. "I didn't mean to wander away. I know," he said gently, cutting through her shame. There was a fierce kindness in his eyes, a promise wrapped in strength. Elena could feel the warmth radiating from him, and she took another careful step forward. "But," she whispered, still wary yet curious. "Call me Darius," he replied with a soft smile. Her heart swelled at the recognition. The world didn't feel as lonely with him there. "Yes," she nodded, desperate for connection. He laughed softly, the sound like a soothing balm on her distressed heart. "It's a small town." Suddenly aware of her vulnerability, she felt the first tremors of trust beginning to thaw the ice inside her. "Can?" Darius rose, extending a hand. "With a little help from my horse, we will make it there quickly. But first, we need to move." She hesitated for a moment, battling her instincts. Here was a stranger, but also a glimmer of hope. Slowly, she took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip. With a mixture of fear and determination, she climbed onto the horse behind him. "Hold on tight," he instructed, his voice steady and comforting. And as they took off into the rain, Elena felt something awaken inside her, an ember of hope igniting amidst her fears. The world blurred into a rush of wet colors, the green of the trees, the gray of the sky, the brown of the earth, all merging into a cascade of sensation as Darius guided the horse through the winding forest paths. For a fleeting moment, she forgot her cold feet and fledgling doubts. She felt weightless, carried forward by the wind and the sheer strength of the horse. But as they moved deeper into the forest, the atmosphere shifted. The wind howled ferociously, almost like a wild beast stirred to anger. Elena could feel the tension in Darius's shoulders, his grip on the reins tightening as they entered a darker stretch of trees. The shadows grew longer, and dread settled in the pit of her stomach. Out of nowhere, a loud crack echoed through the woods, sending birds into panicked flight. Darius abruptly slowed the horse, scanning the area. "Stay alert," he murmured, his voice now low and serious, all traces of warmth replaced by caution. Elena squeaked, the vulnerability of her small size creeping back into her mind. "Just the wind. Or perhaps something else," he replied cryptically, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the trees looming above them like watchful sentinels. Elena shivered, pulling closer to him, suddenly aware of how isolated they were in this wild land. She could see flashes of movement beyond the tree-lined, dark figures lingering, hidden from view. Her heart raced again, fear pounding in rhythm with the horse's hooves. "Darius," she whispered, her voice quaking with uncertainty. "Bandits," he said curtly, breaking the stillness. A storm of adrenaline ignited in his eyes, fierce and unwavering. The world fell silent around them, a tension so thick Elena held her breath. She felt trapped in a nightmarish tale as the shadows moved closer, inching toward her. Her gaze darted around, searching for a hiding spot, but Darius seemed unyielding. "We can't stay here," he decided suddenly, nudging the horse forward. Before Elena could protest, they were off again, racing through the trees. The branches whipped past them like angry hands, but Darius's strong grip kept her anchored. The horse galloped forward, its breath rising in frosty puffs, echoing in her ears. But the bandits emerged from the shadows, their figures materializing behind them. They shouted, voices filled with greed and malice, and Elena's fear reached a crescendo. "Darius." "I know," he replied sharply, eyes narrowed with fierceness. They burst through the underbrush into a clearing, but the freedom was short-lived. The bandits were relentless, pursuing them with a fervor that made Elena's heart race even faster. Darius's instincts kicked in. He maneuvered the horse with confidence, slipping through trees and over roots, but the bandits were closing in. "Don't look back," he shouted, his voice cutting through her panic like a blade. Elena's hands clenched tighter around his waist, each heartbeat resonating with the chaos around them. She concentrated, summoning every ounce of courage, and imagined her home, her mother calling her name a beacon of safety in the middle of the storm. She screamed, and Darius urged the horse on, its hooves pounding against the earth like thunder. As they soared past a fallen log, Elena felt herself slipping, panic rising as she thought she might fall. But Darius shifted, using his strength to pull her closer. "I've got you," he whispered, grounding her in the moment, giving her the confidence to keep fighting. The bandits were almost on them, their shouts mingling with the desperate rhythm of their galloping feet. Elena could feel the heat of danger drawing near. She cried. Darius shouted again, his voice commanding and fierce. With one final push, they burst into another clearing that opened up like a bright expanse before them. But it wasn't just a relief, it was an opportunity. Darius steered the horse toward a small stream, its waters flowing fast and unpredictable. He directed. Elena's eyes widened in fear. "We'll lose them in the water," he replied, determination hardening his jaw. And with that, they leaped into the stream, the cold water crashing against her legs. Elena gasped, the shock jolting her senses. They splashed through the rushing current, the bandits yelling behind them. She clung tighter to Darius, knowing that this was their only chance. As they waded deeper, hiding behind the tumble of rocks, the world around them faded into a haunting quiet. The bandits shouted angrily on the bank, pacing back and forth, hunting for signs of movement. Elena could barely breathe, her heart thudding heavily in her chest, but Darius held her steady, keeping her close. "Stay here until they move on," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Time felt eternal as they crouched in the freezing water, her small frame hidden behind his as they waited for the danger to pass. Minutes stretched painfully, but finally the shouting began to fade. The bandits, frustrated and defeated, turned away, disappearing into the gloom. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her body trembling with a mix of relief and fear. She whispered, looking up at Darius, who seemed to be exuding an aura of strength that calmed her racing heart. "For now," he assured her with a soft smile. With adrenaline still thrumming through her, Elena nodded, and he guided the horse slowly out of the stream. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle, and the sky was beginning to hint at the first colors of twilight. They moved quietly through the rest of the forest until they finally broke free into the open air. In the distance, she spotted the center of town, glimmers of warmth almost tangible beneath the darkening sky. It felt like safety, like home. Elena exclaimed, her voice tinged with delight. Suddenly, the weight of her earlier fears began to lift, and she envisioned warm food, dry shoes. Darius laughed softly, the sound echoing in the fading day. "We did, but first let's find a place to dry off and warm up." As they entered the town, past the inviting glow of shop windows, memories began to surface: laughter, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, the comfort of having her mother nearby. "I can't believe I got lost," she murmured, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "You're a brave girl, Elena. Getting lost isn't a weakness." He paused, looking at her with earnest eyes. Elena felt pride swelling within her. His words washed over her like warm sunlight, and she nodded. They found a small cafe, warmth and light spilling from its windows like an invitation. Elena's stomach growled. Suddenly, she realized how hungry and tired she truly was. Inside, the atmosphere was vibrant, filled with chatter and laughter, every person a comforting reminder of safety. They settled at a small table, and Elena sank into her chair, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Darius ordered soup and bread for them, simple, yet delightful comfort food that would wash the remnants of fear away. As they waited, Elena's thoughts drifted back to the adventure she had just experienced. She had faced danger, darkness. She had ventured into the storm and come out stronger. She asked, her voice tiny amidst the bustling cafe. "I was scared, but I also felt brave," she admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. Darius smiled widely. "You discovered courage in the face of fear." Those words struck deep, resonating in her heart. As their food arrived, Elena savored each bite with gratitude, finally feeling anchored in the moment. She was no longer the lost girl, but a warrior rising from the shadows. After they finished, Darius leaned back, gazing out at the bustling street. He winked, making her giggle. "Yes," she cheered, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She was no longer shivering and afraid. She was alive, filled with the thrill of having conquered the night and the unknown. As they ventured back into the town, Elena knew that someday she'd tell the tale of the brave horseman who saved her, the story entwined with every step she took forward. Every time she laced up her shoes, she'd feel that spark of courage reminding her that, even in the darkness, light can always be found if you are willing to trust, to take a leap of faith. And as twinkling stars began to light up the twilight sky, Elena felt empowered, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The air was still, a thick tension hanging over the small town, as the last echoes of laughter faded into the gathering twilight. Elena, a spirited 10-year-old with wild curls and a bright smile, had been playing with her friends near the edge of the forest. But now, that joy felt very far away. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground like fingers grasping in the dark. She took a step back, glancing at her bare feet, cold against the damp earth. Her blue sneakers had been discarded in a careless fit of excitement, left behind as she chased after a butterfly, its bright colors mesmerizing her. In the blink of an eye, her world had changed. She was no longer among laughter and light, but lost in the cold embrace of the forest. The first chill of autumn settled deep into her bones, and as darkness enveloped the woods, panic began to gnaw at her stomach. Elena looked around, the trees looming above her like towering giants. The whispers of the wind felt eerily alive, and every rustle sent shivers crawling up her spine. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she called out softly, "Hello." No answer came. As she stood there, fear and dread washing over her, she noticed a flicker of movement in the distance. Her heart raced as she squinted through the growing shadows. Was it a mirage or something tangible? Then from between the trees emerged a figure, a horseman, tall and imposing, cutting through the dark like a knight from a fairy tale. Elena held her breath, unsure of what to make of this wild savior. He rode a powerful stallion, its coat gleaming even in the dim light. The horseman wore a weathered cloak that flapped around him like wings, and when he caught sight of her shivering figure, his brow furrowed in concern. "Hey there," he called, his deep voice resonating through the stillness. Elena swallowed, words caught in her throat. She felt so small and vulnerable, standing barefoot in the shadows, the cold wrapping around her. I lost my shoes," she managed to stutter out, the shame of her situation biting into her more than the chilly air. The horseman dismounted swiftly, the soft thud of his boots hitting the ground sounding like a promise of safety. He approached her, and Elena's heart raced between fear and hope, but instincts prodded her to be cautious. Who was this man? Could he really help her, or was he another threat lurking in the darkness? He knelt before her, bringing himself down to her level. His eyes, warm and inviting, unexpectedly eased her fear. He asked gently. "Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling like the leaves around them. "Elena," he repeated, a smile breaking across his face. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Darius." His gaze softened as he noticed her bare feet standing on the cold ground. She felt an odd sense of comfort in his presence, a flicker of safety blooming in her heart. "I didn't mean to get lost," she confessed, her small voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. He nodded, understanding, illuminating his features. "Childhood is full of adventures that often lead us astray, but it's okay." With a steady hand, Darius gestured to the horse behind him. Elena shook her head, but before she could voice her worries, he smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I'll show you. Let's get you out of here." Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, feeling the warmth radiating from the massive animal. Darius extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. He hoisted her up, and she settled behind him, gripping his waist tightly. "Hold on," he instructed, giving her the assurance she needed. As he kicked the horse into motion, they surged forward, and suddenly, the chaos of the forest blurred around them. The wind whipped through Elena's hair, and despite the gravity of the situation, exhilaration sparked within her as they galloped through the darkened woods. But as they ventured deeper, uncertainty crept in again. The trees grew thicker, looming like ancient protectors, and yet they felt menacing all at once. Elena could feel the pulse of danger in the air, a raw energy that prickled at her skin. She asked, a tremor betraying her courage. He turned slightly, his expression focused but unwavering. "We will be fine, Elena." Just then, a distant rustle sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. There was a flicker of movement beyond the tree's dark figures shifting quietly within the shadows. The mood shifted palpably, like a dark cloud casting itself over their moment of safety. She squeaked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Stay close," he directed sharply. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, and Elena could feel her heart racing in tune with the thundering of the horse. Darius's confidence was unwavering, a lifeline anchoring her in the chaos. They burst into a clearing, and for a moment, sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene like a dream. But behind them, a group of bandits emerged, not just shadows, but menacing figures on horseback, their eyes glinting with malice. One of the bandits shouted, spurring their horses forward, chasing them down. Terrified, Elena clung to Darius even tighter. She cried, her small hands trembling. "We run," he replied, voice low but determined. With a fierce nudge, Darius turned the horse sharply and galloped toward the thickest part of the woods again, the sound of their pursuers echoing in their ears. Elena felt the panic clawing at her throat, but she forced herself to breathe, focusing on the strength of Darius behind her. The branches whipped around them as they wove through the trees, the bandits hot on their trail, yelling and laughing, emboldened by their chase. Each shout felt like a knife twisted deeper into Elena's heart. Then suddenly, Darius pulled back on the reins, bringing the horse to a staggering halt. He announced, urgency lacing his every word. He glanced around quickly before guiding them behind a thick tangle of bushes, the foliage thick enough to shield them from view. As they crouched together in the dark, Elena's heart raced wildly. She could hear the bandits pounding through the forest, drawing closer. The world outside was a blur of shadows and danger, but in that moment, Elena felt something shift within her. Here she was, hiding in the underbrush, terrified but not alone. She felt Darius's warmth beside her, that fierce protectiveness enveloping her like a blanket. Minutes dragged on, each second stretching into eternity, the sounds of the bandits growing louder until they began to fade. "Did you see them?" One of them bellowed, their voices echoing through the trees. Elena held her breath, squeezing her eyes shut, desperately hoping they would just keep moving past them. Pressure in her chest began to ease as she realized they were no longer in immediate danger. Darius sighed quietly beside her, and she could sense the tension releasing from his body. Once the voices finally faded completely, Darius slowly pulled back, peeking through the branches to ensure they were indeed safe. When he turned back to her, a gentle smile illuminated his face. "Looks like we made it," he said softly. She let out a shaky laugh, her heart still pounding, but now for a different reason. "That it was," he replied, pride shining in his eyes. As the adrenaline began to wane, hunger clawed at her stomach. "I'm hungry," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. Darius chuckled, the sound lightening the air around them. "Then let's find you something to eat." As they resumed their journey, the world shifted somehow, anxiety slowly replaced by an ember of adventure. They rode forth, through the woods and into the light, the sun beginning to set in vibrant hues of orange and pink painting the sky, a beautiful contrast to the chaos of earlier. The town slowly emerged from the trees, full of life and warmth. Elena could see families gathering, the twinkling lights from shops illuminating the street like stars fallen to earth. In that moment, her heart surged with hope. She exclaimed, her fears evaporating like morning mist. "Yes, it is," Darius replied, a tender smile gracing his lips. As they rode into the heart of the town, vibrant laughter floated through the air, mixing with the wonderful smells of freshly baked bread and cooked meats. Each sound pulled her deeper into the spell of the moment. After tying the horse to a post, Darius led her through the bustling marketplace. Locals exchanged greetings, and Elena couldn't help but feel like she was stepping into a new world, a world where compassion and warmth reigned supreme. Darius pointed to a small shop adorned with colorful shoes lining the windows. With a mix of excitement and nervousness, they stepped inside the shop. The warm air greeted her like an inviting hug, and the sight of rows upon rows of shoes made her feel giddy. She breathed, her eyes sparkling. An older woman behind the counter looked at her and smiled. "What do we have here?" Elena chimed, stepping forward, feeling the thrill of the adventure still coursing through her veins. Darius gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We were caught in the woods and she's been quite brave." The shopkeeper chuckled warmly and nodded. "Of course." Elena tried on shoes of every color, reds, blues, and pinks, each pair sparkling like magic in her eyes. Finally, she settled on a pair of shiny red sneakers that twinkled like stars when she moved. They fit perfectly, and for the first time in hours, she felt warmth wrap around her feet. She exclaimed, beaming from ear to ear. With new shoes secured, Darius led her to a nearby cafe where the warmth enveloped them like a cozy blanket. There, they sat at a small table and ordered steaming bowls of soup and fresh bread. As Elena took her first bite, warmth spread through her, filling her with comfort from within. "I've never had soup this good," she said, savoring every bite. Darius smiled, watching her with an expression that felt like pride. Elena nodded, her heart full. "Today has been the best adventure ever." "Well, it's my job to help those in need," he replied, laughter dancing in his eyes. "And you showed incredible bravery." As they continued to eat and share stories, Elena could see her world changing. No longer just a little girl caught in the cold, she had morphed into a brave adventurer, and every word Darius spoke felt like a piece of armor forging her bravery even stronger. Eventually, night fell outside, and the street lamps flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the town. Elena felt a sense of closure dawn upon her, a realization that she had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. "Thank you for being my hero," she said, her voice sincere. Darius leaned back, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "I'm just glad I was there to help." Sometimes we all need a hero, don't we? With the night air sweetened by the scents of the town and the comforting sound of laughter surrounding her, Elena felt a flicker of something new in her heart, a belief that even in the darkest of moments, hope can be found if we are willing to trust others. As they finished their meal, she knew that this day would mark the beginning of many more adventures. She would tell the story of the horseman who saved her, and the lesson that courage sometimes lies within reaching out for help. And when she slipped her new red sneakers on to walk back into the world, She took that first step forward with a strength that would carry her through many more adventures to come. As the stars twinkled overhead, Elena felt the warmth of connection, the bond born amidst fear turning instead into the guiding light of hope. The chill in the air wrapped around Elena like an unwelcome blanket, sharp and biting against her bare feet. She stood in the dying light of evening, her heart racing, fear pounding in her chest like a drum. Just hours ago, she'd been chasing butterflies with laughter spilling from her lips, but now the world felt dark and cold, each tree looming like a giant ready to swallow her whole. She stared at the forest ahead, its shadows creeping closer, and a knot of panic tightened in her throat. Where had the warmth gone? She had wandered too far, blissfully carefree, and in a moment of distracted wonder, lost her bearings completely. The bright blue sneakers she had proudly worn that day now lay abandoned on the ground, forsaken like childhood innocence. Elena took a tentative step deeper into the woods, the ground damp and cold beneath her. The silence felt oppressive, only broken by the occasional rustle of wind through the leaves. She tried to shake the fear coursing through her, but it clung to her like ivy wrapping around her mind. She called out, her voice trembling as it faded into the gathering darkness. No reply. With each passing moment, loneliness began to settle in, suffocating and cold. Her heart beat loudly in her ears, and she felt a wave of tears threaten to spill over. She missed her mother, the warmth of her embrace, the safety of home. Just when despair began to swallow her whole, she heard something, a faint sound that pierced through the silence. Thud, thud. Elena's heart raced with both fear and curiosity as she turned toward the noise. From the shadows emerged a figure, a horseman silhouetted against the darkening sky. He rode with an air of confidence and strength, a powerful presence cutting through the gloom like a beacon of hope. Elena stood frozen, entranced by the strange figure. Was he a savior or a threat? The horseman slowed as he approached, the horse's hooves crunching softly against the fallen leaves. The weight of his steady gaze fell upon her, and for the first time that evening she felt a flicker of warmth inside her. He called out, his voice deep and reassuring, echoing through the stillness. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Did he even want to help her? What if he was a stranger with ill intentions? I lost my shoes, she finally managed to say, shame creeping into her voice. The horseman dismounted, his movements fluid and confident. He approached her, a slight smile softening the intensity of his gaze. You shouldn't be out here without shoes. I didn't mean to, she said, her voice small. I understand, he replied, his voice warm and comforting like a hug. I'm Darius. Elena hesitated, doubt still clinging to her like shadows in the forest. Would he really help her? What if his intentions were unclear, a disguise cloaking something more sinister? But as she looked into his eyes, she saw kindness, a genuine willingness to assist. With a deep breath, she nodded, feeling her heart begin to trust him. Darius gestured to his horse, strong and majestic, standing patiently beside him. You can ride with me. As he helped her up, Elena felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with fear as she settled behind him. The warmth of his presence enveloped her like a safety net, replacing the chill of uncertainty. Hold on tight, he instructed, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the rhythm of the horse beneath them. With a firm nudge, Darius urged the stallion forward, and they took off through the trees, the wind rushing past them. Elena felt the exhilaration of speed burst through her, a sweet taste of freedom spurring her soul on. Leaves brushed against her arms, and she could almost forget the fear that had gripped her just moments before. But then the atmosphere shifted as the shadows thickened, and Elena noticed something looming in the distance, figures emerging from the woods. Her heart raced again. Was it a trick of the light, or were they truly being followed? She whispered breathlessly, panic flooding her veins again. Stay calm, he said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the woods around them. Elena could sense the tension in his posture, the protective instinct sharpened. Just ahead, the forest opened up into a clearing, and for a moment all appeared serene. The sun dipped down low, casting golden hues across the sky. But the feeling of safety was short-lived. From behind the trees emerged a group of men on horseback, their faces obscured and expressions unreadable, but Elena felt the threat they radiated. One of them shouted, his voice slicing through the calmness like a knife. Darius's grip on the reins tightened. He turned the horse sharply, and Elena instinctively pressed her forehead against his back, heart racing wildly. She could feel the danger closing in as they sped through the clearing, the bandits gaining ground with every second. Elena shouted, urgency flaring within her. As Darius urged the horse into overdrive, they surged forward, the trees whipping by in a blur. Elena's heart raced in sync with the pounding hooves, a chaotic symphony of fear and adrenaline. She had never ridden anything so fast, and as they careened through the woods, terror mixed with an exhilarating thrill. Suddenly, Darius guided the horse off the beaten path, veering to the right where the trees grew denser. The branches clawed at them as they moved, but the chaos blurred into the background of her mind. The only focus was the need to escape, but the bandits were relentless. They charged into the woods, their laughter cruel and mocking, echoing in the air like a warning. Elena could feel the weight of her fear growing heavier. She cried, panic bubbling over, every instinct screaming for safety. Darius called out, urgency lacing his voice as he spotted a thick grove of bushes nearby. He pulled the horse to a halt and quickly guided it into the dense foliage. Elena held her breath as they slipped behind the walls of greenery, the world outside fading to a hush. They crouched down, hearts pounding in unison. Elena could hear the bandits getting closer, their voices rumbling like a storm. One of them growled. Another shouted. They were mere footsteps away, and Elena pressed her back against Darius, drawing strength from his steadfastness. He kept his eyes keenly on the opening, every muscle tensed as they waited, timing their breaths with the cacophony of the menacing voices echoing briefly before they trailed off. Finally, as the sounds began to fade into the distance, Darius sighed in relief, and Elena couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for him. "I didn't think we'd make it," she whispered, her heart still hammering in her chest. "Neither did I, but you did great," he replied, his voice low and full of warmth. As the stillness settled around them, she realized she wasn't just relieved. They had faced the dark together, and she felt stronger for it. Overwhelmed by an urge to thank him, she turned to Darius. He smiled softly. Taking a moment to steady herself, Elena looked around the thicket enclosing them, her heart slowly calming. She asked, an eagerness for the next step bubbling beneath her skin. "Now we make our way out of here," he said, his tone resolute. With that, they crept from their hiding spot, moving cautiously through the woods. Finally, they entered a path that led out onto a dusty road lined with wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze, a sign that they were nearing the edges of civilization. Elena saw the outline of a town in the distance, lights beginning to flicker into life as twilight deepened. A wave of hope surged through her. They were almost there. "Look," she exclaimed, pointing excitedly. Darius replied, a smile breaking across his face, and Elena felt the warmth of his expression. As they approached the town, the familiar sounds of laughter and muted conversation filled the air, embracing her like a long-lost friend. It felt like stepping back home, a sweet refuge from the chaos they had escaped. Darius led the horse to a small stable on the outskirts, where he carefully tied it up. Elena could feel a mix of excitement and exhaustion wash over her. She asked, glancing around at the buildings glowing with welcoming light. "First, let's find somewhere for you to get a warm meal and new shoes," he said, glancing around at the small shops lining the street. Darius motioned for her to follow, and together they walked through the town. They entered a quaint cafe, bursting with energy and the light scent of fresh bread. She shouted, her eyes lighting up. Darius chuckled. "Let's get you some," he said, leading her into the shop, which was filled with sparkles and colors that seemed to dance in the light. Elena tried on shoe after shoe, reveling in the comfort and warmth finally enveloping her feet again. She finally settled on a bright pair of red sneakers, their laces striped in white, perfect for the adventurous girl she had become. "Thank you," Elena exclaimed, bubbling with joy. "You've earned them," Darius replied, a proud smile gracing his face. Once her feet were warm and secure, they made their way to a nearby diner where the smell of hearty stew filled the air. Elena sat down excitedly, her stomach rumbling at the prospect of food. As they waited for their meals, Darius leaned back, watching her with a twinkle in his eye. He asked, genuine curiosity radiating from him, Elena thought for a moment, a smile creeping onto her face. "I learned that it's okay to be scared." Darius nodded thoughtfully, his expression warm. "That's a lesson worth holding on to." Their meals arrived, and Elena dug in with fervor, savoring every spoonful of the rich stew. It felt like more than just food. It was a celebration of resilience, a feast for overcoming fear. As they chatted and laughed over their meal, Elena couldn't shake the feeling of gratitude. Here was this man who had turned her worst day into something extraordinary, a stranger who had become a friend. Soon, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and Elena realized that she felt whole again, stronger than she had been before. With their plates clear and warm satisfaction settling in her belly, Darius looked at Elena, a serious but gentle expression taking over. "You're not just brave, Elena." Elena felt a sense of power rise within her, a determination solidifying her heart. She declared boldly, and in that moment she knew the truth. Every moment of fear and uncertainty had shaped her, turning her into something strong and beautiful, a warrior ready to take on the world. As they left the diner with full bellies, the stars began to twinkle overhead, and Elena looked up in wonder. She felt the warmth of hope knitting lovingly through her heart, promising bright tomorrows filled with more adventures. With Darius beside her, she strode forward, ready to embrace the open road. The girl who had been lost in the forest now stood grounded in courage, confidence flushing through her veins like sunlight breaking through clouds. The night stretched endlessly ahead, but Elena held her head high, knowing no matter where the journey led her, the heart of a brave adventurer beat strong, and she was ready for whatever lay in store. The cold wind sliced through the air, a biting reminder that autumn had arrived. Elena stood shivering, her small feet bare on the unforgiving ground, and in that moment she felt completely adrift. Just a few hours earlier, she had been in the warmth of her home, giggling with her friends, playing tag in the fading sunlight. Now, darkness crept in like an unwelcome guest, and panic tightened its grip around her heart. She had wandered too far, chasing after a butterfly, enchanted by its vivid colors, only to realize that the world she knew had vanished behind the trees. A chill ran down her spine as the branches of the old oaks towered above her, their limbs twisting and turning like skeletal fingers. Every rustle of leaves made her jump, each sound magnified in the eerie quiet of the forest. Her voice trembled as she called out, but only silence answered her, a silence thick with fear. Elena hugged her knees to her chest, trying to draw warmth into her. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, a mixture of regret and fear swirling within. Just then, a sound broke through the stillness, a rhythmic thudding, distant yet approaching. For a brief moment, her heart leaped with hope. Was it someone coming to help? As she squinted into the shadows, she caught sight of a figure emerging through the trees, a tall horseman riding a magnificent stallion. As his silhouette drew closer, the tension that had thrummed in her body began to ease just a little. He called, his voice echoing through the trees, deep and reassuring. Elena's breath caught in her throat, caught between the joy of seeing someone and the instinct to hide. I lost my shoes," she managed, her voice trembling like the leaves above her. She felt small, vulnerable. Approaching slowly, the horseman dismounted gracefully, his expression one of concern mixed with gentle curiosity. "You shouldn't be out here alone. It's too cold for that," he said, looking down at her bare feet, chilled and muddy. "I just wanted to chase the butterfly," she confessed, feeling foolish. The weight of her mistake pressed on her chest. "I understand," he replied, a soft smile surfacing on his lips. "But now you're here and I can help you." Elena could see kindness in his eyes, a warmth that rekindled a flicker of hope within her. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," he said gently. "But you need to trust me." An internal battle raged within her, but she desperately wanted to believe him. Elena hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. Darius extended his hand, and she felt warmth radiating from it. She took it, feeling the security of his strength. He helped her onto the horse, settling her behind him. "Hold on tight," he instructed, and as she wrapped her arms around his waist, a surge of exhilaration mixed with her lingering fear, a rush of adrenaline that pulled her closer to him. He nudged the horse into motion, and they surged forward, galloping across the uneven terrain. The wind whipped through her hair, stinging her cheeks but also invigorating her spirit. For a fleeting moment, she forgot her troubles, lost in the thrill of the ride, an adventure unfolding beneath the sprawling sky. But the peaceful moment shattered when a distant shout pierced the air, a warning that sent the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. She cried, panic creeping back into her voice. He shouted back, urgency lacing every word. They whipped around a bend, and as they did, Elena caught a glimpse of figures emerging from the tree-lined dark silhouettes chasing them on horseback. A wave of terror washed over her, and she clutched Darius tighter, both frightened and exhilarated. Elena asked, heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. "Bandits," he replied tersely, his voice dangerous yet calm. As the bandits roared behind them, laughter mingling with their shouts, Darius urged the horse forward, speeding through the undergrowth. Panic clawed at Elena's insides, the thrill of the ride now replaced by sheer terror. She screamed, barely able to form the words as the reality of their situation began to sink in. With a fierce determination, Darius maneuvered the horse through the trees, their bodies weaving expertly among the trunks, dodging branches that reached out like warning fingers. Elena felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, urging her to survive, but fear still gnawed persistently at her. She shouted over the pounding hooves, "Toward the river." He shouted back, his voice fierce and unwavering. The underbrush thickened and the world around them blurred, but Elena could feel the danger closing in. Every thud of the bandits' horses echoed like thunder in her ears, the chase growing more desperate by the second. Darius broke through a thicket, revealing a vast clearing where the river lay ahead, its waters rushing fiercely. It glittered under the fading light, a ribbon of safety cutting through the chaos. Darius yelled, and with a sudden leap, they plunged into the cool water. Elena gasped as the cold splashed over her, but Darius held her tightly as the horse swam through the currents. The bandits shouted in frustration, shadows fading away as they reached the riverbank. For a moment the world went still, the roar of the water drowning out everything else. Elena clung to Darius, the cold water swirling around them, but she felt a rush of exhilaration. They were safe, at least for now. Darius guided the horse to shore, and as they emerged gasping for breath, they both fell into silence, the cold air wrapping around them like a protective cloak. Elena asked, her heart still racing but tinged with hope. "Seems like it," Darius replied, scanning the tree line behind them cautiously. "But we can't stay here long." They set off once more, still damp but filled with renewed energy. With every step, Elena felt a powerful surge of gratitude toward Darius. He was her hero, but he was also something deeper, a guiding force in her darkness. As they made their way through the forest, the shadows began to lift, revealing a path leading toward the distant town. Elena could feel the warmth beckoning her, and with each step her feet began to warm despite being soaked. Darius asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "It's small but cozy," she replied, her heart swelling at the thought. "There's a big oak tree in the yard where I like to climb." "That sounds lovely," he said, a smile breaking across his face. As they neared the outskirts of the town, the air began to change. The warm scents of freshly baked bread and roasted meats wafted into Elena's senses, a tantalizing promise that only fueled her eagerness to return home. But as they stepped into the first street, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A crowd gathered around a fountain in the town square, voices blending into a chorus of excitement. Elena asked, pulling Darius's sleeve gently. "Let's check it out," he replied, guiding her through the throng of people. As they got closer, Elena caught sight of a lively festival taking place. Laughter echoed through the air alongside lively music, colorful lanterns hanging from the trees and people dancing joyously. It was a celebration, and her heart soared as she realized how much she longed to be part of it. Struck by a wave of emotion, Elena turned to Darius, her eyes wide with wonder. He chuckled softly. "Of course." They made their way deeper into the crowd, and as they weaved through joyful faces, Elena felt herself lightening. The thrill of the festival brought warmth flooding back into her chest, chasing away the cold that had haunted her. They shared roasted corn and fresh berry pies, laughter replacing her lingering fear. Elena's heart swelled, reveling in the freedom of being surrounded by joy. Each shared moment with Darius forged a bond stronger than anything she had ever felt before. Suddenly, music filled the air, a lively tune that beckoned people to dance. Elena watched in awe as a circle formed, encouraging others to join in. A yearning filled her, and she found herself glancing up at Darius, a spark of courage igniting within. She asked, excitement bubbling over. He exclaimed, and as he took her hand, they stepped into the circle together. The laughter that surrounded them dissolved any remnants of fear, and as they moved to the rhythm, Elena felt alive. Darius matched her steps, his joy infectious, and for a moment they spun through the world together, a little girl and her horseman, united in the thrill of the night. As the evening wore on, laughter intertwined with the music, and other families joined in, pulling Elena into the warm embrace of community. She felt the walls she had built around her heart melting away, a newfound strength blossoming inside her. Finally, the night deepened, and as the festivities began to wane, Elena found herself sitting on a bench beside Darius, watching the stars twinkle overhead. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady, full of gratitude. Darius looked at her, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You saved yourself too, Elena." In that moment, Elena understood the truth. The journey had not just been about being rescued. It had been about discovering her own resilience, a core of bravery that would carry her through life. Her heart filled with light, and the warmth between them felt like a promise that she would never forget. As the last echoes of laughter began to fade into the night, Elena looked at Darius, determination filling her gaze. "You've taught me so much today." "You already are," he replied, his voice firm yet gentle. And with those powerful words, Elena knew her life had changed forever. She was no longer just the scared girl lost in the woods. She was a brave adventurer ready to face anything that life might bring. As they watched the stars flicker against the velvet sky, Elena felt her heart beat steadily, a rhythm grounded in hope, connection, and newfound strength. Together they sat in silence, two souls illuminated under the vastness of the universe, knowing that no matter where their paths might lead, they would always carry the spark of courage within them. The sound of laughter faded behind her, swallowed by the encroaching darkness of the forest. Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She had been playing, running barefoot through the grass, but the thrill of the game turned into dread as she realized how far she had strayed. Now the air was thick with whispers of trees, and a cold wind wrapped around her, sending a shiver down her spine. She called out, but the words echoed back to her, lonely and cold. No one could hear her here. She had chased a butterfly, mesmerized by its flutters, and now, in the blink of an eye, the familiar sounds of her friends had vanished. The forest loomed ominously, shadows creeping along the ground like dark specters, each rustle of leaves making her jump. Elena looked down at her bare feet, mud caked around her toes and the chill of the earth biting into her skin. She wished desperately for the comfort of her sneakers, the warmth of home. The wind howled, reminding her just how unprepared she was for this sudden plunge into the unknown. As tears pricked at her eyes, a sudden clatter broke the silence, thunderous hooves pounding against the ground. Her heart raced as she turned toward the sound, searching desperately for its origin. Suddenly, from between the trees, a horseman appeared, framed against the waning light. He rode with a confidence that flickered like a beacon in the darkness. He called out, his voice booming yet filled with an undeniable kindness. The moment Elena saw him, a rush of hope surged through her, but it was quickly eclipsed by caution. She had heard tales of bandits and rogues who roamed these woods. Clenching her fists, she forced herself to respond. "I'm lost," she stammered, feeling small and terrified. The horseman slowed down, dismounting with practiced ease. His cloak billowed around him, framing a figure that appeared both strong and gentle. He surveyed the surroundings. Elena's throat tightened as shame washed over her. "I was playing." "Understandable," he said, his voice calm, cutting through her embarrassment. "I'm Darius." Without thinking much, Elena stepped forward. She could see concern etched in his eyes, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him like sunlight before a storm. When he gestured to his horse, she hesitated but felt an undeniable pull toward safety. He asked, as if sensing her doubt, "No," she whispered, her voice almost lost amidst the rustling leaves. "I'll show you how," he said. With a trembling heart, she took his outstretched hand and he helped her onto the horse. Elena sat behind him, her nerves firing like fireworks. Darius settled in front of her, his confidence a sturdy anchor against her growing fear. "Hold on tight," he instructed, feeling her arms wrap around his waist. And then, with a swift kick of his heels, they were off, galloping through the trees, the wind whipping through her hair and bringing a mixture of adrenaline and terror. The forest blurred around them as Darius navigated the winding paths. Elena felt an exhilaration she had never known, each thud of the horse's hooves resonating with her racing heart. But that thrill quickly faded as a sharp shout echoed through the woods. Elena's heart plummeted as the realization hit her. Bandits lurking in the shadows had spotted them. She yelled, fear twisting in her chest as if tightening around her throat. Darius didn't need to be told twice. He urged the horse forward, racing through the underbrush as branches clawed at them, a maze of shadows entwining around them. Elena kept her eyes fixed forward, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Darius shouted above the cacophony of pounding hooves and rustling leaves. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, and she felt a new kind of bravery, mixed with pure terror. She didn't want to look back. Part of her feared what she might see. Darius reminded her, steering the horse through the treacherous terrain with a deftness that left Elena in awe. The trees blurred as they sped past, a rapid dance of branches and shadows. The laughter of the bandits echoed behind them, sinister and mocking. Suddenly, Darius veered sharply to the right. He yelled, determination flaring in his voice. As they broke through the trees, the sight of the rushing river came into view, a broad expanse of water glistening under the dim light like a wild promise. Alarm bells rang in Elena's mind. They wouldn't make it. But with an unwavering resolve, Darius charged toward the water. He shouted, and without hesitation, they plunged into the chilling depths. The cold struck her with shock, but she leaned into Darius, feeling the raw power of the horse as it swam against the current. It felt surreal, the danger of the bandits temporarily lost beneath the roar of rushing water. Elena gasped for air, the chill surrounding her like a blanket. Darius kept the horse steady, guiding them toward the bank. As they emerged, panting and shivering, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. "We've lost them," he said, catching his breath and glancing back into the trees. Elena's heart fluttered at the thought of being free. But before they could celebrate, the moment shattered. The shouts of the bandits echoed through the woods again, the darkness still alive and relentless. Darius commanded, and Elena felt his urgency pushing her forward. They got back onto the horse, soaked and trembling. Yet they pressed on, crossing the muddy ground toward the safety of the town, the gentle glow of lights drawing them in, promising warmth. Minutes blurred into an uncertain rush. Each second felt like a lifetime as Darius navigated through the twisting paths leading them to the heart of town. The laughter and chatter of townsfolk began to reach her ears, but the feeling of safety was still distant. Then, as they broke through the trees and into the open, the bustling scene of the town unfolded before them. Elena marveled at the glow of lanterns, the inviting smell of food wafting through the air. But more importantly, the sight of people, living, breathing beings. Her heart swelled with hope. "Look," she exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder. Darius replied, guiding the horse toward the nearest group. But just as they neared, she spotted a familiar figure, a woman with kind, familiar eyes rushing toward her. Her mother's voice rang like a bell, filled with both worry and relief. Before she could fully process everything, Elena leaped off the horse and ran into her mother's open arms, burying her head in her comfort as tears of relief streamed down her cheeks. "I thought I lost you," her mother whispered, holding her tightly. "I'm okay, Mom," Elena replied, her voice muffled against her shoulder. Darius had dismounted and stepped closer, watching them with a warm smile. Elena turned to him, gratitude brimming in her eyes. "This is Darius," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "Thank you for bringing her back," her mother said, her tone earnest as she reached out to shake Darius's hand. "It was my pleasure," Darius replied, his voice calm and steady. As Elena stood between them, feeling the warmth of her mother and the gratitude toward Darius, the earlier fear began to dissolve into the background. The laughter of the town felt like music surrounding her, a symphony of rescue and hope. As they spoke, Darius looked around the town and then back to Elena. "You should rest now." "Yes," her mother added, brushing hair from Elena's forehead. A warmth enveloped Elena, settling in as acceptance washed over her. She felt like she had walked through fire only to emerge stronger on the other side. "Thank you, Darius," she said, looking into his eyes, her heart swelling with gratitude. He nodded, a knowing smile spreading across his face. "Courage comes in many forms, Elena." As darkness fell, the town glimmered around them, alive with laughter and relief, the air filled with kindness and connection. In that moment, Elena realized that this was more than just a story about being lost. It was about finding herself, about trust and bravery, about the bonds forged in the fires of fear and love. As the night deepened, laughter mingled with the crisp autumn air, and she felt a spark of reassurance lighting within her, promising a future filled with more adventures and the strength to face them head-on. And as long as she could trust and be courageous, she knew she would never actually be lost again. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground, and as the light faded, Elena felt a deep chill settle in her bones. Just hours before, she had been laughing, playing with her friends by the old oak tree. Now she stood alone in the forest, cold and frightened, her bare feet feeling the biting chill of the ground beneath her. With every step, the reality of her situation grew heavier. She had chased after a brilliant butterfly, its vibrant wings fluttering effortlessly in the air, only to suddenly realize she had wandered far from home. The laughter of her friends had faded into silence, replaced by the eerie sounds of the forest. The rustling leaves sounded like whispers, warning her that she was utterly alone. She called into the darkening woods, but her voice echoed back at her hollow and solitary. Panic welled up inside her as fear turned her heart into a frantic drum. She pulled her arms tightly around her knees, trying to contain the trembling that threatened to shake her apart. Just then she heard it, a sound distant but growing closer. It was a rhythmic pounding, like thunder rolling in the distance, but sharper, more immediate. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. What if it was something dangerous? Her instincts screamed at her to run, but curiosity held her in place. Then, just moments later, a figure emerged from the tree line. A horseman, tall and imposing, cutting through the gloom. The sunlight caught the edges of his cloak, making him appear almost majestic against the backdrop of the darkening woods. Elena squinted, her heart racing as he drew closer, the massive horse beneath him a creature of power, muscles rippling as it moved. His voice was deep and filled with authority, yet kind. Even with the uncertainty of the moment, Elena found herself holding her breath, the tension in her chest shifting into something fragile, a glimmer of hope. "I'm lost," she admitted, her tiny voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. The horseman dismounted gracefully, his leather boots thudding softly against the ground. He approached her, concern etched into his features. Elena glanced down, suddenly aware of the mud caked on her bare feet. The shame came flooding back. She had let her curiosity lead her into this mess. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said gently, crouching down to meet her gaze. "I'm Darius." "I just wanted to chase the butterfly," she murmured, feeling even smaller under his watchful eyes. He smiled, the warmth of it gorgeous amidst the looming darkness. "I understand." With a steadiness that belied the urgency of the moment, Darius reached out his hand. Elena hesitated, her instincts warned her to be cautious of strangers, yet there was something reassuring about him. Perhaps it was the strength in his voice or the kindness in his eyes, but she felt drawn to trust him. She took his hand, a rush of warmth sweeping over her as he helped her onto his horse. Darius climbed on in front of her, and as the powerful beast began to move, Elena felt both exhilaration and fear. "Hold on tight," he instructed, and she wrapped her arms around his waist. As they rode, the wind whipped past them, and for a fleeting moment she felt free, not just from the forest but from the fear that had bound her since losing her way. The trees blurred by, the shadows dancing around them, but just as her pulse began to calm, a shout echoed through the trees, crashing down on her like thunder. "There they are!" The words sliced through the air, dark and echoing, and Elena's heart plummeted. Instinctively, she clung tighter to Darius, feeling the urgency in his every move. He shouted, his voice sharp with command as the bandits surged into view, chasing them on horseback. Their laughter was cruel, and the fear gripped Elena more tightly than anything she had felt before. With fierce determination, Darius kicked the horse into a gallop, weaving through the trees. The branches beckoned like reaching claws, but he maneuvered expertly, guiding them through the chaotic terrain. "Stay right behind me," he instructed, his voice steady despite the danger that chased them. Elena did as she was told, nearly forgetting her fear as adrenaline surged through her. They dodged branches and leaped over fallen logs, the world a wild blur of motion. But the sound of the bandits grew louder, their hooves pounding against the earth like thunder. Elena cried, sheer panic freezing her voice. Darius shouted back, focus etched into his features. Ahead, the trees began to thin out, a glimmer of something bright beckoning just beyond the shadows. A clearing. Hope surged within her again, urging her to believe they could escape. But just as they broke free from the tree line, the scene unfolded before them. A rushing river, its waters churning and dark, glistening weakly under the dying light. Elena's heart sank. She gasped. Darius yelled, determination swelling in his voice. There was no hesitation as he steered the horse toward the riverbank. Elena's instincts screamed at her, panic clawing its way up her throat, but Darius acted without pause. He commanded, and with a mighty leap, they plunged into the icy waters. The cold shock hit her like a bolt of lightning, ripping a gasp from her lungs as they plunged beneath the surface. The horse kicked and swam, and Elena felt Darius's arms around her, keeping her safe as the world turned into chaos. She held her breath, the rush of water drowning out her thoughts and fears as they fought against the currents. When they emerged, gasping for breath, they were soaked to the bone, shivering violently. Darius hurried them to the riverbank, glancing back in the direction they had come. Elena felt the cold seep deeper into her, but as adrenaline coursed through her veins, she just nodded. Together, they shuffled to the closest mossy patch, trying to catch their breath. As silence settled over them, Darius scanned their surroundings, eyes sharp and alert. Elena asked, her voice shaky but curious, the thrill of survival filling her with a sense that they were not done yet. "The town is not far from here," he replied, determination lacing his tone. With that, he helped her back onto the horse, and they began to trot alongside the riverbank. Despite the chilly air, Elena felt a fire igniting within her. She was scared but also connected to Darius. He was her ally in this terrifying journey. As they moved closer to the edge of the forest, Elena could see the first flickers of light from the town, warm and inviting. But with each step, the shadows around them deepened, threatening to pull them back into the darkness. Then, just as they crossed a small ridge, a loud shout reverberated through the air. It was the same cruel voice from before, echoing against the night like a dark omen. Panic surged once more, and Darius kicked the horse into a full gallop, the ground blurring beneath them as they raced toward the town. Elena felt fear coiling tightly in her stomach, every breath mingling with determination. They had come so far, there was no going back now. But as they neared the town's edge, the bandits began to close the gap, their laughter punctuating the night air like a warning shot. Elena looked back, and her heart dropped when she saw the dark figures weaving through the trees, their eyes filled with malicious delight, hunters relishing their prey. She cried, squeezing Darius tighter as the wind rushed past. He pushed the horse harder, breathless determination etching his features. The lights of the town flickered closer, but the sound of hoofbeats crashed against her ears, a pounding reminder that they were still in danger. Just as they burst through the last line of trees, Darius turned sharply, urging the horse towards the nearest alleyway. They ducked into the darkness, the horse's hooves muffled against the cobblestone. Darius hurriedly guided them around corners, glancing back over his shoulder as they pressed deeper into the labyrinth of streets. Elena gasped, adrenaline making each breath feel like fire. "For now, just keep quiet and hold on," Darius replied, but she could see the tension radiating from him. They burst into a small square, illuminated by lanterns that flickered like tiny suns. People milled about, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the shadows. Darius pulled the horse to a halt, scanning the area frantically. Just as they stepped forward, the sound of boots echoed behind them, the bandits emerging from the alleyway, eyes scanning the small crowd. One of them shouted, and Elena felt the world tilt around her. Darius commanded the horse to turn, but it was too late. The weight of danger loomed in the air, thick with impending disaster. Elena's heart thundered, each beat echoing the fear swirling in her stomach. She looked back at Darius, who was his own fortress of strength, yet even he felt the limits of their situation. The townsfolk finally noticed, confusion etching their features as the bandits stormed closer. Elena's breath came faster, her tiny body trembling at the sight of the menacing figures approaching. Darius grunted, his voice sharp and focused, preparing for the encounter that was quickly turning into chaos. They were out of options, surrounded by danger, and with each passing second, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. Elena took a breath, the realization flooding her mind. This was a turning point, a moment that would define everything that came after. She lifted her chin, fear swirling with fierce determination as she prepared for a fight she never expected to face. But in that moment, just before chaos erupted, Elena felt an unexpected swell of courage deep in her chest. She gripped Darius tighter, feeling the connection between them, the bond forged through terror, adventure, and the unknowable patience of survival. And then it happened. The fate of the night hung like a delicate thread, spinning toward an unknown conclusion, resonating with the intensity of the moment. Would they escape? Would they stand and fight? As her heart pounded in rhythm with Darius's, Elena knew there was no turning back now. With fear grabbing hold of her, she took the leap, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead.